Hello. My name is Maggie, and I am a knitter and sewist who lives in Denver, Colorado. This is my first episode of the Knitting in the Hospital Wing podcast. Ridiculous, narcissistic podcast that I decided to start mostly to keep track of my own knitting. I'm very realistic about this and realize that, probably no one else in the entire world is ever going to want to watch this. But I think that I will, later, 10 years down the road, I'll, look back and be like, wow, okay. But, yeah, a little bit about myself. I named this podcast Knitting in the Hospital Wing because I am currently in my fourth and final year of medical school here in Denver, Colorado. I originally grew up in a small mountain town in northwest Colorado and really love, skiing, mountain biking, all that kind of stuff. But in November, found knitting and have just sort of gone way off the deep end because I just seriously love it more than I ever thought would be possible. But I also called it Knitting in the Hospital Wing, not just because I'm in my fourth year of medical school and thus spend a considerable amount of time in the hospital working. But also just because Harry Potter is probably my one true love. I really, really adore Harry Potter. It has gotten me through good times, bad times, all of the above, and all of my knitting projects are based off of Harry Potter and really inspired by the characters that J.K. Rowling wrote. I am a millennial, and so these are characters that I grew up with and I learned to love from a really young age and was inspired by, in the fourth grade when the first book was published until now. I still reread them every year and just sort of listen to the Jim Dale recordings on repeat. My husband thinks that I'm insane because as soon as I finish the seventh book, I just start the first book again because, I want to read as much Harry Potter, or I guess listen to as much Harry Potter as humanly possible. So I say that because there are definitely going to be spoilers in this. If you have not read Harry Potter, I would recommend that you not listen to this, which, again, I know that nobody's going to watch this anyway, but I don't want to give it away because, it's funny because anybody that I've ever met who hasn't listened or read Harry Potter, I'm like, I am so jealous of you. Because if you haven't read it, then you will get to experience this amazing world that has the potential to really change your life and change the way that you think about the world and what's right and what's wrong. And, it's just done so many amazing things for me that I am very envious of people who have not had the opportunity to ever read it before. So with that, I guess the other things that I should say are my house and my Patronus. And then I will also talk about my wand a little bit later today. And that will become very clear with how I'm deciding to sort of break up this podcast. But so I am part of the Ravenclaw house, which beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. I think that house is amazing just because I am such a nerd. But also because I think, it's really cool that they really cherish creativity and strangeness and sort of originality, which I think are all aspects of they're all aspects that I hope to, have in my life, and that I think are really important. I think something that's different when you're an adult is just that, it's cool to be weird, and I like that Ravenclaw sort of embraces that from the very beginning. My Patronus is a black swan, based off the Pottermore website. Don't really know much about that. Haven't really had many aspects, haven't really had any relations with swans in my life, but I think it's kind of cool, My husband, when I told him that it was a black swan, he was like, "Aren't Patronuses white? I don't get it." And then I had to explain that, the outline of the swan is white, but then the inside is dark, and so it's sort of mysterious. And he was like, Okay. And then my wand is an applewood wand with a phoenix feather core. So I'm going to start with what I'm wearing. So this is the Lydia 2.0 tank. It is off, or I knitted it out of a Cascade cotton that I got from one of my local knit stores called Colorful Yarns. And I knitted on just my Lydia interchangeable set. I really wanted a sweater or a shirt or garment that I could wear in the summertime, because here in Denver it's like 95 degrees, which like I don't like it past 80 degrees. That's just like the way that I generally am. I really am not a huge fan of summer in general. But I really love this tank top. It's really comfortable. It was really fun to knit. The lace is really interesting, and I like that the lace only goes like halfway up the top, because then, you know, you have this like really interesting kind of complicated thing to do for a little while, and then you can just be like, fuck it, like, you know, now's just time for like stockinette with the like occasional like purl through the back loop. It's great. And yeah, that's all I want to say about that. It's really great. I highly recommend it. The directions are fantastic. It's actually the first time that I've ever been able to do a tubular cast on. I tried to do it many times before and was like, I don't get it. I like cannot do it. But the way that she writes it out, and then there's a really great YouTube video, is just invaluable. Like, it was incredibly easy to wrap your brain around how to do it once I had something that I could watch and see, you know, how the stitches actually work. So yeah, the Lydia 2.0 top, highly recommend it. It is fantastic. The next thing that I'm going to talk about are just some works in progress and finished objects. I'm going to start with just some works in progress. And how I'm planning on doing this, because again, I am such a Harry Potter nerd, is all of my projects have been really influenced, like I said earlier, on Harry Potter scenes or characters. And so I'm just going to show the product itself, and then I am going to go through and talk about the story behind the project. So the first one is my Madame Rosmerta's Poisoned Oak Matured Mead. So this is, as you can probably guess, this is Andrea Mowry's Wool and Honey, and I knit it in Knerd string yarn. They're 4-ply fingering weight in the Penny Lane colorway. So Knerd string is a local yarn dyer here in Colorado. They had this like amazing burnt orange, which I just thought like would go so perfectly with Andrea Mowry's design. And this is both my first ever fingering weight sweater, which is pretty tedious. I mean, I think it's like beautiful, but it's just taken forever, particularly I think because it's in garter stitch in the round. Although I don't like hate purling as much as like most of the people that I've watched. But yeah. So right now I have finished the whole body, and then one sleeve. I decided to knit the sleeves longer, so on me, I am very tall and have very long arms, so it will actually go all the way to my wrists rather than the 3/4 length that Andrea Mowry did it. So I'm just like plugging away at my second sleeve. It has taken forever, but I just like, you know, it's great and I love it, but it's just not very fun anymore because it's just like the same thing over and over again. And I'm just like, I'm really excited to have the sweater, but now it's like definitely just a product knit because it's just like not as fun anymore. But yeah, I knit this all on my Lydia interchangeable needles. When I first started knitting in November, I just like bought some interchangeables and I've just been using the same ones. But I realized very quickly that I do not love Magic Loop, and so I did get some Chiagu 12 and 9mm needles in order to knit my sleeves in the round, because I just think that it goes a lot faster. And this is in a project bag that I made. It's actually all out of some scraps that I got. Most of this fabric is actually from the Fancy Tiger Crafts store, craft store that's in Denver, Colorado. I love that place. I made a dress out of this fabric, which is just so cool. It has like all of these bugs and snakes, and I just think it's incredible. And then the accents here and here are out of a fabric that I got to make a shirt in. And then my husband wanted a like apron, a shop apron, because we do a lot of our own like mountain biking fixing. And so he wanted a shop apron so he wasn't getting like grease and stuff like that all over his clothes. And yeah, and then I just have like a pocket on the inside out of that same fabric lined with that, and it's just like a drawstring bag. It's like pretty straightforward. Although I'm like not the best sewist in the world, so those bags take me like an entire day because I'm just like, how does it work? I don't get it. But yeah, Madame Rosmerta is the inspiration for this. Again, the name of it that I named it is Madame Rosmerta's Poison Oak Matured Mead. And she is a pretty important but sort of obscure character in Harry Potter. She is the landlady of the Three Broomsticks, a bar in Hogsmeade. And essentially, she is sort of in on the gossip that's going on in the wizarding world. But in the 6th book, Draco Malfoy is he's been tasked by Voldemort, Mr. Tommy Riddle, with assassinating Dumbledore. And this is something that, like, Voldemort expects Draco to fail at. But he decides to do it anyway, really to punish Draco Malfoy's father, Lucius Malfoy, because of the Department of Mysteries, which, you know, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole because we've got a lot of content to get through. But anyway, Draco Malfoy, in an attempt to assassinate Dumbledore, he puts Madame Rosmerta under the Imperius Curse, which causes a variety of problems within Hogwarts, one of which causes Katie Bell to be cursed by a necklace that was meant to be a gift for Dumbledore. And in the case of Madame Rosmerta, she gives Horace Slughorn poisoned oak matured mead that ends up poisoning Ron Weasley. But thankfully, Harry Potter has learned quite a bit from the Half-Blood Prince, and he puts a stone from inside of a goat's stomach, I believe. I forget what it's called exactly right now, but he saves Ron with that. And so, yeah, I just thought, you know, mead is made of honey, and this is wool and honey, and I just love this pattern. I think it is so cool. Anyway, so that is Rosmerta. Hopefully I'll finish that soon. Who knows? I mean, honestly. The next thing I want to talk about is a pair of socks. This is my 3rd pair of socks ever. I'm trying to do a box of socks. Kristen of Voolenvine is having a knit along for a box of socks, and I'm trying to do that, but who knows if I'll actually finish 12. Like, honestly, this is my first year knitting. I don't know. It's like, seems like a big thing, but anyhow, these socks are my Acromantula Venom socks, which is another reference to the 6th book in Harry Potter, the Half-Blood Prince. I mean, in a way, it's also the 2nd book because you first meet Aragog, the famous Acromantula, which is one of Hagrid's pets in the 2nd book. But the venom really comes in the 6th book. So I'll just show you. This is just the beginning of the sock. So this pattern is the Slip Stitch Lines sock pattern by La Maison de Saba. There we go. And then this yarn is actually Teeny Button Studio. So this is their, price is on there still. So this is their logo, Teeny Button Studio. This is their soft sock in the Acromantula Venom colorway. And I really love this for the fact that they have a ton of Harry Potter yarn. So it's like, not only do you get to name it yourself, but like she has actually come up with this like amazing colorway that is meant to represent the Acromantula Venom. And Acromantula Venom is important in Harry Potter because during the 6th book, Harry Potter is supposed to find out from Horace Slughorn, the new professor of potions, what he told Tom Riddle. Because he has this memory that he changed, and there's no way to really get the memory out of him unless he gives it willingly. And Harry tries to get the memory from him in a variety of different ways and ends up taking Felix Felicis, which is a lucky potion. And he goes out to Hagrid's hut, and he runs across Horace Slughorn, who then decides to accompany Harry to Hagrid's hut, where they then find that Aragog, the Acromantula, has died. And this is very important because Acromantula venom is very, very rare. And Horace is able to take some Acromantula venom from Aragog's sort of corpse, which is like a little creepy, but and they start drinking, and then later in the night he actually tells Harry about the Horcruxes and about 7 being, you know, the number of times that Voldemort split his soul, which is really important because the 7th book, the entire 7th book, is pretty much like all about, you know, killing Horcruxes and thus killing Voldemort. And then this is just in another one of these drawstring bags that I have made. This is out of some just like incredible fabric that I got from Joann's that is just like really cool Harry Potter house fabric that I'm actually in the process of making a dress out of, because like I'm going into pediatrics. I can wear whatever I want. Like if I want to wear a Harry Potter dress, as long as it's like a professional cut, whatever, kids are gonna love it. And my next work in progress is something that I just started the day before yesterday. I took a class on Blueprint about how to do brioche stitch, which is something that I've always been really intimidated by because I've like watched a couple of YouTube videos before, and like the yarn overs and the knitting together, I was like, what the actual fuck is going on? Like, I do not understand. But this class like really broke it down really well, and I really loved it. And I sort of started with single color brioche and then went on to 2-color brioche, which I think is just like so beautiful, and I love that it's reversible. I just think it's gorgeous. So with that, I'm still thinking of a name for this, because sort of what I do is I like start knitting with things that I love, and then I'm like, what about Harry Potter does this remind me of? But this is Stephen West's Excuse Me shawl, and you can see here. So I've just started, and it's growing very quickly, which means that there are more stitches, which means that it takes me a lot longer. But so this dark color here is La Bien Aimée in the Emeline colorway, and it's their merino singles base, and I'm just holding it double, so I don't know if you can see that, but holding that double, and then on the back side you can see just this like gorgeous sort of, it's mostly green, like a sage green, but then it has little pops of like red and purple and blue and teal. That is Voolenvine Yarns Nouveau in the Deadly Nightshades. So this is the Voolenvine, and then these are the balls of the La Bien Aimée. Both of these yarns have a great story. My mom is like one of my very best friends, and her sister, my wonderful, beautiful Auntie Susie, is another of just like one of the most important people in my entire life. Both of those women decided to take a trip to Europe over the spring. And my mom, one of the places they were stopping, which it was so sad because it was right after Notre Dame was on fire. But anyway, so they went to Paris, and I was like, Mom, you have to go to La Bien Aimée. I was like, it's a famous yarn store and you're gonna go crazy. And so she got me 6 skeins of yarn, which is insane because I was like, Mom, I just want one, like just get me one skein. But she spoiled me, which was great. And then the Deadly Nightshades, so I was an idiot and put the wrong address into my order for them, and luckily it wasn't like anybody else's address, so it's not like somebody else got my yarn and I was just like out of luck. But they ended up sending it from Brooklyn to Denver, back to Brooklyn, which was, it was a pain. But Kristen was so amazing. She got back to me like right away when I was like, I'm such an idiot. Like, and I told her that I would pay for shipping, and she was like, no, I'll just like send it back. So yeah, I will definitely be buying from her again. Her yarn is gorgeous. It's so beautiful, and like her customer service is just incredible. But I'm really loving how this is knitting up. I just think Brioche, it's so squishy. It's so squishy. I love it. I'm like obsessed. But for me, in terms of like Harry Potter, I think that this really looks like, it's like reptilian. Just with the greens and the, oh my gosh, it's just so, it just reminds me of a snake so much. And so I'm toying with a few different names, but I think that I have settled on the snake nailed to the Gaunt shack. Other things that I was thinking of are like parcel tongue or parcel mouth, or maybe like heir of Slytherin or something like that. But I just think like the Gaunt shack was such like a dark and horrible place that like in a lot of ways was sort of like the birth of Voldemort. And I just think like they spoke only in parcel tongue while they were together. And, I just think it just feels so right. So, so yeah, I think the snake nailed to the Gaunt shack. And the Gaunts, they are a really interesting and pretty sad group of people. So essentially the Gaunts were Marvolo, the grandfather of Lord Voldemort, Morphin, uncle of Lord Voldemort, and Merope, Lord Voldemort's mother. And, they were the last known descendants of Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, as well as the Peveril family. So in a very direct way, it really shows that actually Lord Voldemort and Harry Potter are related in a very distant way, obviously. But so I just think that it's really interesting because when Lord Voldemort committed his first murder, he murdered his father and his 2 grandparents, Tom Riddle Sr. and then Tom Riddle's parents. But what he did, instead of just sort of leaving it, is he stupefied his uncle Morphin. He took Morphin's wand, murdered his father and his grandparents, and then he changed Morphin's memory so that Morphin completely admitted to killing his father, to killing Tom Riddle Sr. as well as the 2 other muggles that were living there. And Morphin, he was a very sad and horrible character, but it's, him coming to the end where he sort of dies alone in Azkaban, just like hoping and wishing that he could find his father's ring that he lost, that you later see Tom Riddle wearing, and Tom Riddle turns into one of his Horcruxes and then hides in the Gaunt shack, is just crazy to me. And I think just really dark and sinister. And this, while I love it, it just like seems dark and sinister to me. I mean, anyway. So with that happy note, the last 2 things that I want to talk about are 2 finished objects, which are 2 pairs of socks. So the first one that I will talk about is my Diagon Alley socks. So these are just a vanilla sock recipe. I use 64 stitches. I do it on a 2.25 millimeter needle. This is a self-striping yarn by the amazing and ridiculously talented Nomadic Yarns in their Diagon Alley colorway on her yak sock base. And I just love them. I think they are so cool, and I'm going to wear them so much this winter. And yeah, Diagon Alley is such a special place. I think it's like one of the first times that you really discover magic in the wizarding world in Harry Potter. At the very beginning, you discover magic just by the fact that you sort of meet Albus Dumbledore and you meet Minerva McGonagall, who's been like sitting on a ledge's cat forever. But this is like the first place that you're really brought into the magical world. And so I thought that it'd be very, very fitting to start with that. Start with sort of the very beginning, the first book, the first time that Harry himself really experiences magic in a very real way. So yeah, this is the Nomadic Yarns Yak Sock Base, Diagon Alley colorway, and then it's just vanilla sock, but I did do a fish lips, kiss heel, and some different yarn, which I'll actually talk about now. So this is my last finished object that I'm going to talk about. These are what I like to call the Holly and Phoenix Feather 11 inches nice and supple socks. So these are little Paddocks socks by Ambrose Smith, and these are the first socks that I ever knit. So I really love them. I think that they actually turned out like amazingly cool for my first sock, and like also now that I'm like learning more about knitting, I'm like, oh, like it was probably not the best idea to choose like a somewhat I mean, it's not complicated now, but like to choose a lace pattern at all for your first sock, like, but these are things that you don't know when you're learning how to knit. You're like, I don't know, like seems like a sock, but honestly, Ambrose's directions were so good and so easy to understand that with just like a couple YouTube videos about like what is turning the heel, like don't even what, like couldn't wrap my brain around it, but like after watching a couple YouTube videos, it was really easy. So yeah, this is knit out of Madeline Tosh in her Woodstock colorway, which is just this like really interesting colorway that it's mostly like a gray brown color, but then it just has like these hints of red in it that you can just see like every so often, and that's why when I was knitting it, I was just really inspired by Harry's wand, which is made out of holly, which I think is the sort of like general color in this sock, and then phoenix feather, which are just sort of like the pops of red. And so now I would just like to move into like a little bit of what I'm going to call story time. So this is like the really embarrassing part of this, where I'm actually going to read a small excerpt from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending which side of the Atlantic you are on, by J.K. Rowling. And this is actually an excerpt from the first book, obviously, when Harry is in Diagon Alley to pick up his wand. And it's the last thing that he buys while he's there, and he's already had so many just like incredibly magical experiences, but this is sort of the culmination of his day there. So, bear with me. Ah, yes, said the man. Yes, yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon, Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here buying her first wand. 10 1/4 inches, long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he could blink. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, a little more powerful and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it. It's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course. Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. And that's where Mr. Ollivander touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long, white finger. I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did it, he said softly. 13.5 inches. You, powerful wand, very powerful. And in the wrong hands, well, if I'd known what the wand was going out into the world to do. So then in the story, Ollivander takes out a measuring tape and he's sort of talking to Harry as this measuring tape by itself sort of measures all parts of Harry from like his wingspan to like the distance between his nostrils. And then we come to this next excerpt. Right then, Mr. Potter. Try this one, beechwood and dragon heartstring, 9 inches, nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a whirl. Harry took the wand and, feeling foolish, waved it around a bit, but Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hands almost at once. Maple and phoenix feather, 7 inches, quite whippy. Try. Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. No, no. Here, ebony and unicorn hair. 8.5 inches, springy. Go on, try it out. Harry tried and tried. He had no idea what Mr. Ollivander was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on the spindly chair, but the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder. Yes, why not? Unusual combination. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Harry took the wand. He felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. He raised the wand above his head, brought it swishing down through the dusty air, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, throwing dancing spots of light onto the walls. Hagrid whooped and clapped, and Mr. Ollivander cried, "Oh, bravo! Yes, indeed! Oh, very good! Well, well, well! How curious! How very curious!" He put Harry's wand back into its box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, "Curious, curious." "Sorry," said Harry, "but what's curious?" Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious, indeed, that you should be destined for this wand, when its brother, gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. "Yes, 13.5 inches. You. Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand chooses the wizard, remember. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great." Oh my god. Sorry, but I'm just like, I get so sucked into it because like, J.K. Rowling is a genius. She's like amazing. I think like even the earlier books that are a little bit more rudimentary and aren't as, I don't know, I think like as the series prolongs, it becomes more of adult books. And at the beginning, it's more of like YA books, like getting kids into reading. And I just think like, still, I'm sucked in 100%. So good. But anyway, I really, really love that scene. I think, like, it's one of the first time, like, Harry knows that he's famous, but I think that's one of the first times where he's, like, really confronted with his fame and with his destiny. And I just think that there are so many questions that I have about wands. So I'm just going to, talk about this for a little bit. To be clear, like, I'm not really going to be talking about any more knitting. So if you're like, why is she still droning on about Harry Potter, then now is your time to leave. But anyway, So I wanted to talk about the different cores that are mentioned, and then also the different woods that are mentioned in the wands. So all of these wands are made by Mr. Ollivander, and the first one that I'm going to talk about is Harry's wand. So Harry's wand is made of holly, and like we said, phoenix tail feather. And holly itself is very rare. It's traditionally considered a protective wood that works most happily for those who may need help overcoming a tendency to anger, which I think when you think about Harry, it is so true. In the first few books, he's not as angry as he becomes, but like really starting in the fourth book and then again like very intensely in the fifth book, he has a lot of anger that he has to deal with. And I think it's interesting that the holly wand is meant to be protective against others, but also against the person who's wielding it, which I just think is very, interesting and subtle even from the very beginning. A holly wand also chooses owners who are engaged in some sort of dangerous or often spiritual quest, which obviously Harry is. And it varies most dramatically in performance depending on the core that it has. Interesting. Holly wands notoriously are difficult wood to team with a phoenix feather, as the wood's volatility conflicts strangely with the phoenix detachment. In the usual event of such a pairing finding its ideal match, however, nothing and nobody should stand in their way. So that's why it's sort of an unusual combination, but Harry, obviously, it works very well for him. The next wood that I am hoping to talk about is Voldemort's wand, which is the yew wand. My husband is up here and it's really embarrassing me. Anyway, is the yew wand, and that is Voldemort's wand. So Voldemort and Harry both have a twin core of a phoenix feather that is actually Dumbledore's faithful and loyal phoenix fox. He gave two feathers, one of which was Harry's wand, and one became Voldemort's wand. So Voldemort's wand is made of yew, which is also a rare wand. It endows its possessor with the power of life and death. Which I think is like particularly interesting in Voldemort because this is the wand that he used to make all 7 of his Horcruxes, which was really an attempt by Voldemort to evade death, and he did evade death for several years with the use of the Horcruxes, but once his secret was discovered in the 6th book and then all his Horcruxes were destroyed in the 7th book, ultimately allowed him to die. So the yew wand is also dark and fearsome. It has a dark and fearsome reputation in the spheres of dueling and of curses. Witches or wizards, though best suited to the yew wand, might equally prove to be fierce protector of others. So it's not that the people who have a yew wand are like just destined to be dark wizards. They have found that the possession of the yew wand is found pretty much equally in heroes and villains. And I thought something that's interesting is that where wizards have been buried with wands of yew, the wand generally sprouts into a tree guarding the dead owner's grave, which I think is fascinating, especially when we think about Voldemort himself and the fact that this is something that I really don't like about the 8th movie, about how it differs from the books, because in the books, what happens in the end is that Harry does kill Tom Riddle, but his body is still there. He just sort of dies just as a man would do. He's not special in death. He's just a man who dies. And in the movie, it becomes this whole thing where he just like explodes and like, turns into like ash and his body like disintegrates, and it's like a very magical and very powerful and pretty moving scene. But I like the idea that Tom Riddle, like, he just dies. There's nothing special about it. He just dies. But it makes me wonder in the books then, if Tom Riddle was buried, what they did with his body, if they did plant his wand with him, or if he just sort of, because at that time he doesn't have his wand anymore. He has the Elder Wand, so I don't you know, it's an interesting thing where it's like, I wonder if he was buried. If he was buried, I wonder if he was buried with his wand, his original wand. And if so, if there's like some yew tree in this magical universe that's protecting Voldemort's grave. I don't know. It's interesting. And then, you know, because I'm a narcissist, I just wanted to research my own wand as well. So my wand is an applewood wand. It is also rare. It is powerful and best suited to an owner of high aims and ideals because it mixes poorly with dark magic, which I think is really interesting. The possessor of an apple wand will be well-loved and long-lived. They also have an unusual ability to converse with other magical beings in their native tongues. It is, so for example, the celebrated author of Merpeople, A Comprehensive Guide to Their Language and Customs by Dylan Marwood also had an applewood wand. So I just thought that was cool. I wish that I was better at speaking to people of different languages, especially with my profession. We have a lot of patients that speak various different languages, anywhere from, you know, like Somali to Arabic to Spanish to French. And I am working really hard to learn, you know, at least Spanish. Medical Spanish, I think, is something that's really valuable, especially in the Western United States. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe my applewood wand will help me in my aim. Although, to be clear, I don't think that people who speak different languages are like different beings. We're all humans, and we all deserve to be able to communicate with our doctors. So anyway, and then all three cores, so my wand, Voldemort's wand, and Harry's wand, are all phoenix feather cores. So this is the rarest core type. It's capable of the greatest range of magic, though they may take longer than either unicorn or dragon cores to reveal this. They show the most initiative, sometimes acting of their own accord. They're the pickiest when it comes to potential owners and the hardest to tame and personalize. And their allegiance is usually very hard won. So, yeah. I just think wand lore is really interesting, and I have so many questions. And I also think like it's interesting in the books how they decide to talk about wands, because there are many different wand makers, and Ollivander is definitely the most famous in the universe that we are introduced to, like sort of the Harry Potter, Great Britain universe of magic. But there are other universes of magic. For instance, Fleur Delacour has, I believe it's a hair of her grandmother, which is a Vila hair, in her wand. And, you know, the Vila hair is something that Ollivander doesn't even use. So Ollivander uses many different kinds of wood for his wands, but he only uses unicorn tail hair, dragon heartstring, and phoenix feathers. I think it goes into why, but I mean, I'm just like talking off the cuff. Yeah, I have so many other questions about wands and wand lore. Some things that I've been thinking about just like when I was thinking about wands and like deciding to film this podcast, which it's like suddenly I'm like, it's funny for me to say wands because I keep thinking I'm saying wan, which is like what Lavender Brown calls Ron Weasley when they have their love affair. But anyway, so I have so many questions. Like, if you break your wand and you get a new wand, was the first wand that you picked up at Ollivander's like your one true wand that was like the best wand that you'll ever have? Or do you sort of change and grow and evolve, and then when you get this new wand, it works just as well as the first wand? Like, I don't know. Interesting. And then also, how do you win a wand's allegiance? And why do some wands that originally belonged to someone else work so poorly? Because we have two characters, actually, in Harry Potter who use family members' wands during their first few years at Hogwarts. So one of those is Neville Longbottom. He is famously pretty terrible at magic. But my contention is that he is only terrible at magic because he is not using a wand that was bought for himself. Neville uses his father's wand. Frank and Alice Longbottom, unfortunately, were tortured into madness by Beatrix Lestrange. And Neville uses his father's wand until it breaks at the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. And in the beginning, you know, like the wand just does not work for him. And I think the big reason why is that it's not loyal to him. It doesn't really want to work for him. And so when he's a young wizard trying to use this wand, when he's just learning magic and doesn't know magic, like how can you possibly expect it to actually work for him? And he's just tormented by his lack of magical ability when in fact, like I don't think it has anything to do with him, which is sad. But he becomes much better at magic when he has to buy a new wand, which I just think is interesting. And they didn't really talk about it that I remember in the books, but and then the other character that's also a big character in the books who uses a family member's wand is Ron Weasley. So he, in the beginning, especially really only in the first book, uses his brother Charlie's old wand, a hand-me-down wand that then gets destroyed by the Whomping Willow in the second book when they decide to fly the family car to Hogwarts. And I have like even more questions about this one because like with Neville's wand, it is not, his dad is not going to be using his wand because he is mad and he just lives at St. Mungo's forever and, you know, he really has no need for a wand anymore. So I understand why Neville gets his father's wand, but I just like cannot wrap my brain around why Ron gets Charlie's wand, particularly because Charlie is still alive. He's like off, you know, dealing with dragons. Like, why does he need a new wand? Unless, you know, now that I'm thinking about it with the Weasleys, like there's a very good chance that this wand has just been like passed down. Like Charlie happened to use it for a little while until he passed it on to Ron when he, you know, was old enough to have like his own job and his own money, and he went out and like bought a wand that was like actually meant for him. So I'm guessing that that's probably what it was, that like before Charlie had it, it like wasn't actually Charlie's wand, and it was probably like a grandparent's wand that has passed or something like that, because like why would Charlie get a new wand if his wand wasn't broken? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, these are questions I have, but I'm probably only nerdy enough to be like sitting in my living room alone, talking to my computer about Harry Potter and like still having a conversation with myself, which is crazy. Anyway, with that, that's all I have to talk about. I have no idea when I will film another one, probably in a couple of weeks, as long as I'm still having fun. So yeah, thanks so much. Bye.